Hello and welcome to Lost Love Mystery, where we explore the twists and turns of love, the pain of betrayal, and the mysteries that lie hidden in the heart. I had just gotten home, kicked off my shoes, and grabbed a cold beer from the fridge when I realized something was off. Molly, my wife, wasn't home yet. Normally, even when she stayed late at work, she'd beat me home and have dinner ready. As I reached for my phone to check in, it rang first. "Hey babe," I answered. "Hi, Jack." Molly's voice was warm, but something about it felt rehearsed. "Still at work?" I asked. "Yes, but we're leaving now, and I have a surprise for you. One I think you'll like. At least, I hope you will." She let out a nervous chuckle. That was unusual. Surprise? Huh? All right. Should I start dinner or pick something up? "No need for that tonight," she said quickly. "We won't have time. Maybe later." That was odd. I took a sip of my beer. "Okay, but what's this about?" "We just need to talk when I get home. Please be there, Jack." There was a pause before she added, "And just remember, I love you. Only you." The words were sweet, but the tone? Off. Forced. Almost guilty. "I love you too," I said, frowning as the call ended. Something wasn't right. 20 minutes later, Molly walked in, and one look at her told me all I needed to know. Messy hair, wrinkled blouse, no stockings, smudged lipstick. I felt my stomach drop. "Rough day?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She gave me a forced smile, walked up, and wrapped her arms around me. "Jack, you know I love you, right? And you know I'd do anything for you?" I stiffened but nodded. "Yeah, of course." "Good," she exhaled, pulling back slightly. "Because there's something I need to tell you. And I need you to really listen before you say anything." I braced myself. "Go on." She hesitated, biting her lip, then dove in. "You know how you always let me make most of the decisions? How you're always kind and never controlling?" I shrugged. "I don't see the point in arguing over little things. If it makes you happy, why not?" "I know," she said, eyes flickering with something that almost looked like regret. "And I appreciate that. But, I've been talking to my boss, Ralph, about our relationship, and he's given me a lot to think about." My grip tightened around the bottle in my hand. "Your boss? What does he have to do with our marriage?" "He's been showing me a different perspective," she said, voice dropping. "About dominant men and submissive ones." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. Nothing. Molly swallowed hard and whispered, "He says he's an alpha male, Jack. Strong, assertive, a real man. He takes what he wants. And he's convinced that deep down, you're a beta, a man who actually likes submitting." A cold weight settled in my chest. "That's some pop psychology garbage," I muttered. "But go on. I'm dying to hear what comes next." She flinched but kept going. He thinks our marriage would be better if we explored a different dynamic. One where he takes charge. And where you..." I cut her off. "Where I what?" Molly's eyes darted to the floor. Her next words were barely a whisper. "He says you might even enjoy watching." I went very, very still. "You're joking," I said, but I already knew she wasn't. Molly's face burned with shame, but she pressed on. "I know it sounds crazy, but he's been making me feel things, Jack." And I let him. "He's been touching me. I mean, just in the office." My pulse pounded in my ears. "Molly," I said, voice low, "are you telling me you've already cheated on me?" She winced. "No, not exactly. We haven't had sex yet, but..." I clenched my jaw. "But what?" He touched me. In his car. On the way here." She swallowed hard. "And he's outside. Waiting." I felt my blood turn to ice. "What the hell are you saying, Molly?" My voice was barely above a whisper. She took a shaky breath. "He's waiting in the driveway, so we can talk. And then, he wants to come upstairs. With me." I dropped the beer bottle. It shattered at my feet. "And you think I'd be okay with this?" My voice came out eerily calm. Molly nodded frantically. "Jack, just listen. I love you. I swear I do. And I know you love me. But this could be something exciting, something new." I let out a hollow laugh. "So let me get this straight. You brought your boss. the guy you've been fooling around with, to our house. And you expect me to just step aside and let him, what? Defile my wife? While I watch. Molly's lip trembled, but she didn't deny it. I let out a slow breath. Well, don't let me hold you back, I said coldly. Go upstairs. Get ready. Shock flashed across her face. Wait, really? I smirked. Oh yeah, it's going to be epic, Molly. As she turned toward the stairs, I reached into her purse, grabbed her car keys, house keys, and phone, and slipped them into my pocket. Then I walked into the kitchen, grabbed a towel, a handful of zip ties, and a very big knife. It was time to meet Ralph. I stepped outside, gripping the knife in my pocket, my pulse steady. Ralph's car sat at the end of my driveway, its engine still running. Through the windshield, I saw him staring at his phone, probably texting Molly some nonsense about how he was about to claim her. I walked up to the driver's side, and as soon as he saw me, he smirked. The arrogance in his eyes made my skin crawl. Ah, little Jack, he said, rolling down the window. So, I assume your wife told you the good news? No worries, man. I'll still let her have sex with you sometimes, at least for now. I didn't let him finish. With all the strength I had, I threw a left hook straight into his nose. The sickening crunch was immensely satisfying. Ralph's head snapped back against the headrest as blood gushed from his nostrils. I tossed the kitchen towel onto his lap. Here, you might need this, Ralphie, he groaned, clutching his face. What the fuck? Before he could react, I yanked his left wrist up and zip-tied it to the headrest bar. His dazed confusion turned to panic as I grabbed his right wrist and locked it to the steering wheel. What the hell are you doing? He stammered, blood still dripping down his lips. I leaned in close, my voice low and calm. I'm teaching you what happens when you mess with another man's wife, Ralph. His cocky grin was gone now, replaced with real fear. Listen, man, let's be reasonable. No need to get all. I cut him off with a brutal left hook to his stomach. He doubled over, gasping for air. I smiled. So, Mr. Alpha Male, having trouble asserting dominance? He wheezed, his confidence completely shattered. I reached down and grabbed the garden hose lying nearby, its steel spray nozzle attached. With a powerful swing, I smashed the car's side window, sending shards of glass flying across the seat. Then, I walked to the front and slammed the nozzle against the windshield, creating a spiderweb of cracks. Finally, I shattered both headlights for good measure. Ralph was trembling now. Jesus Christ, man, are you insane? I crouched down next to him, pulling the knife from my pocket. The second he saw it, he froze. I pressed the blade lightly against his neck. How many times have you fucked my wife? My voice was deadly quiet. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Just twice. Just in the last few weeks. I swear. It was nothing, just sex. I studied his face, weighing his words. He was scared, terrified even. Good. You think I'm gonna kill you, don't you? I whispered. He didn't answer, but his eyes screamed yes. I let out a humorless chuckle. I should. But you're not worth it. I yanked the knife away and stabbed it into the passenger seat instead. Your lover Molly will need this to cut you loose. Or maybe she'll leave you here like this. Either way, she's your problem now. Then, I turned on my heel and walked back toward the house. The moment I stepped inside, Molly's voice called from upstairs. Ralph, is that you? Did you talk to Jack? Come and take me. I stopped in my tracks. Did she really just say that? After everything? I shook my head, forcing down my disgust. Molly, I called back. Ralph is in the car. He wants to talk to you. A moment of silence. Then, the sound of her footsteps coming downstairs. She emerged wearing nothing but a silk robe and the lingerie I had bought her. She gave me a hopeful smile. So, did you two sort things out? I stared at her, amazed at how blind she was to reality. Go outside, Molly. She frowned. Why? Just go. Talk to your alpha. She hesitated, then, still clueless, walked past me, out the door. The second she stepped outside, I locked it behind her. I watched from the window as she walked to Ralph's car, still expecting some romantic moment. Instead, she stopped dead in her tracks when she saw him, zip-tied, bleeding, and panicked. What happened? Ralph, what did he do to you? I could hear her shrieking through the glass, her hands fumbling to untie him. I smirked. Time for the next step. I headed upstairs, grabbed one of our suitcases, and started stuffing it with her things. Clothes, shoes, makeup, everything. Then I walked to the front window and shouted, "Molly, over here. You might need this." I tossed the suitcase onto the driveway. A few bottles of perfume shattered on impact, but I didn't care. Then, for good measure, I grabbed her tennis shoes and chucked them at her head. She dodged just in time. "Jack, what the hell are you doing?" she screamed. I leaned against the window frame. "I'm helping you start your new life, Molly. You wanted to be with him, right? Well, congratulations. You're his problem now." Her face crumpled. "No, Jack, wait. Please, let me in. Let's talk." I didn't even let her finish. I slammed the window shut. I walked back downstairs, grabbed her handbag, and with one final throw, sent it flying at her chest. "Is that enough for you, Molly?" I said coldly. Her lips trembled. "Jack." I didn't respond. I simply turned around, walked into the house, and locked the door. I poured myself another beer, sat down on the couch, and let out a slow breath. I had just ended my marriage, and I didn't regret it one bit. I sat on the couch, beer in hand, listening to the muffled sounds of chaos outside. Molly was shouting something, her voice shrill with panic. Ralph was groaning, still struggling with the zip ties, his pathetic whimpering music to my ears. I wasn't sure what I expected to feel in that moment. Anger, regret, relief. But mostly, I just felt done. I walked to the front window and peered out. Molly had finally managed to cut Ralph loose using the knife I left for her. He was still holding his bloodied nose, glaring at me from behind the windshield like some wounded animal. Molly turned toward the house, eyes filled with desperation. She ran back to the door and pounded on it. "Jack, please. We need to talk about this." I took another sip of beer, savoring the cold bitterness. Then, just to twist the knife a little, I leaned against the door and called out, "Your boss is waiting for you, sweetheart." A heavy silence. Then, I heard a choked sob. Ralph grumbled something under his breath and climbed into the passenger seat, still too shaken to drive. Molly lingered for another few seconds, her breath hitching, before she finally turned and got in beside him. I watched as the car reversed shakily out of the driveway, its cracked windshield catching the glow of the streetlights. Then, just like that, they were gone. The cleanup. For the next few hours, I moved through the house like a machine. I packed the rest of Molly's things into trash bags, clothes, toiletries, even the ridiculous self-help books she had started reading about redefining marriage roles. By the time I was done, I had stacked everything by the front door. I'd let her decide where to pick it up from. Then, I did the one thing I knew I needed to do next. I called a lawyer. I didn't even hesitate. The moment he answered, I told him I needed a divorce attorney. Fast. The first attempt at reconciliation. 2 days passed before I heard from Molly again. I ignored the first few calls. Then, she left a voicemail. "Jack, please. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I need to talk to you. Please, just once." I sighed. I knew this conversation was inevitable. So, I called her back. Molly answered on the first ring. "Jack, thank you for calling. Just get to the point." I cut her off, my voice cold. She hesitated, then said, "Can I come over? Just to talk?" I exhaled slowly. "Fine. 1 hour. Be on time." And I hung up, facing Molly one last time. An hour later, Molly pulled into the driveway. I watched from the porch as she got out of her car. She looked different. Her face was swollen, her eyes red and puffy. She had clearly been crying. A lot. She wasn't wearing makeup, and there was a weight to her steps, like she had aged overnight. She approached hesitantly and sat beside me on the porch steps. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, in a small voice, she whispered, "Jack, I'm so sorry. I didn't say anything." She sniffled and continued, "I don't even know how I let this happen. Ralph got in my head. He made me feel wanted, desired, like I was special." I clenched my jaw. "And I didn't?" Her head snapped up, eyes wide. No, Jack, you always made me feel loved. But he was different. He made it sound like I was missing something, like we were missing something. And I was stupid enough to believe him. I let out a bitter chuckle. Yeah, you were. She flinched but didn't argue. I haven't been with him since that night, she said quickly. After what you did, he fired me. Said he didn't want to be anywhere near you. Good. I nodded, unimpressed. And what do you want from me, Molly? She swallowed hard. I want to come home, Jack. I want to fix this. I stared at her. You want to fix this?
Yes.
I let out a long breath and leaned back. Molly, let me explain something to you. We were together for 5 years, married for 3. And in just a few weeks, you let some arrogant prick convince you that I wasn't enough. That our marriage wasn't enough. Her eyes welled up with fresh tears. I know I messed up. But Jack. No, listen to me. I cut her off, my voice firm. If, after just 5 years, you're already looking for more, then what happens in 10, 15, 20? Do you really think this was a one-time mistake? Because I don't. She shook her head desperately. It was. I swear. I would never. You already did, I said flatly. Silence. Molly buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. I waited. Then, after a moment, I spoke again. I don't trust you anymore, Molly. And I sure as hell don't respect you. And without trust or respect, there's nothing left. She sobbed harder. Finally, she looked up at me, eyes pleading. Jack, please. I love you. I met her gaze. No, you loved what I gave you. You loved the comfort, the security. But you didn't love me enough to be loyal. And now you've lost me. Her face crumbled. So that's it? You won't even try? I exhaled. I already called a lawyer, Molly. We're getting a divorce. She gasped. Jack, no. Please, don't do this. I stood up, signaling the conversation was over. I'll pack up the rest of your things. Tell me where you want them sent. Molly shook her head in disbelief. I can change. I can prove to you. No, Molly. You proved who you really are the moment you let another man touch you. She clutched her stomach like I had physically hit her. Then, slowly, painfully, she nodded. I didn't say another word. I just turned and walked inside, leaving her sitting there. For a while, she didn't move. Then, finally, she stood, got into her car, and drove away. I didn't watch her leave. I didn't care anymore. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, letting out a long breath. It was done. Molly was gone. I walked back to the kitchen, grabbed another beer, and sat down at the dining table. The house felt different now, emptier. But not in a bad way. It was peaceful. For the first time in days, I felt calm. The divorce process. The following weeks were a blur of legal paperwork, meetings with my lawyer, and endless emails. Surprisingly, Molly didn't fight the divorce. Maybe she knew she had no ground to stand on. Maybe she just felt guilty. Either way, she signed the papers. The house was put on the market. Our joint savings were split. I kept my car, and she kept hers. We had no kids, thank God. So there were no messy custody battles. It was clean, simple, over. I barely spoke to Molly throughout the process. When I had to, I kept it short and emotionless. She looked miserable every time I saw her, but that wasn't my problem anymore. She made her choices. Now, she had to live with them. Ralph disappears. I never heard from Ralph again. A mutual friend later told me he had resigned from his job and moved out of town, probably scared I'd come after him again. Good. Let him spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. The healing. It took time. Even though I knew I had made the right decision, even though I felt relief, there were still moments of pain. Moments where I'd wake up and instinctively reach for Molly, only to remember she was gone. Moments where I'd see an old photo of us and feel a pang of nostalgia. But nostalgia is just that, a memory, not a reason to stay stuck. So I forced myself to move forward. I started hitting the gym more, focusing on my health. I spent more time with friends, reconnected with old hobbies, and slowly, the weight of betrayal started to lift. Life went on, and eventually, I realized something incredible. I was happier without her. A new beginning. A year later, I was sitting in a coffee shop, minding my own business, when a woman sat down across from me and smiled. "Hey, Jack," she said, tilting her head. "Long time no see." I looked up and blinked. It was Emily, an old college friend. We hadn't spoken in years, but there she was, looking as beautiful as ever. I smiled back. "Emily, wow, it's been forever." She grinned. "Yeah. So, tell me, how's life?" I chuckled, leaned back, and took a sip of my coffee. "You know what? Life's pretty damn good. And for the first time in a long time, I'm in it." The end.